Emery lowered herself as she did before charging at another person. When the defect turned the direction of his palm towards a vexed villager, she flashed towards the defect. Simultaneously, her lighter form took shape and tackled the villager onto the ground, dodging the flames. The moment was so fast that I doubted anyone even noticed the glowing lighter form of Emery flash.
Diamonds and Dust. Within the walls, there is Lytonia, a utopian nation that does not accept the weak or the defective. Outside the walls are the dangerous and unpredictable wildlands. Neither are safe, and both have their secrets. Hello, my name is Destiny Hawkins, and I am the author of Diamonds and Dust. This futuristic dystopian fantasy is one of many episodes portraying characters from the dark fantasy book series, The Descendants. You can listen to this episode at any time, including to fall asleep, during study time, as you commute, and so forth. Also, keep in mind that you can listen to any episode in any order. Below, you can find the links to the Descendants book series, which I highly recommend that you start for better understanding. Otherwise, enjoy the wonders and point of views of characters you'll grow to love.
Dust and wind whipped through her dark hair as the earth crumbled around us, and even through her exhaustion, I could see the fierceness in her gray-blue eyes. We had been outrunning the end of the world for a few months now, never able to stay anywhere for too long. Before, when the world was still, we were only surviving the conditions of our nature, but after the rumbling, it wouldn't stop crumbling. So, we ran, and we ran, surviving together, never knowing when the rest of the world would completely cave and swallow us up. All we knew was that we had to keep running. Jada and I both turned to face the collapsing earth rushing towards us. She and I had just gotten through the forests and were on our way to the mountains, where we were told of safety and protection from other survivors of the destruction. They traveled with us for some time before being crushed by a falling tree during another rumbling. We barely even made it out alive, and now we had to escape another attack from the earth. Jada frowned, her eyes flashing white as they had been since the first massive rumbling. We didn't know what it meant, but we had the feeling that she wasn't the only one. There wasn't anything about myself that had significantly changed, besides the fact that I was having unfamiliar dreams. But we did believe that they meant something. After all that time, we still hadn't found out what any of my dreams meant, but we held hope that we'd find out sooner than later. We had all hoped up until that day. When Jada nodded to me, she and I burst off into a sprint together, hoping to put as much distance between us and the crumbling earth. At some point, it should have just stopped, allowing us to stop and catch our breath. But this rumbling was different. This one was almost as bad as the very first, when the world had begun to fall. And we didn't outrun it. We couldn't. The earth was shattering in front of us now, rushing towards us from both the front and back. I could never see where the world was falling to, but there were times when it appeared as if it were falling deeper into another place. The rumbles always left enormous breaks in the earth, making traveling nearly impossible. All that would be left was a deep, gaping hole that seemed to lead into nothingness. No one had ever known what was down there, and even if they fell in, they'd probably never find out. Now, we were trapped, and the crumbling earth was closing in on us from both sides, the back end at our heels. It was almost a relief when we noticed the front end had come to a stop, and I was hopeful that the crumbling would end from behind us as well. So when it had, I felt only a moment of safety before I realized that Jada was no longer beside me. "Ellison!" she yelled as she slipped back, reaching her hand out to me. I quickly whipped around and reached back, her weight dropping and swinging against the stone. Holding tight, I was yanked down to my stomach, my chest sliding to the edge of the cliff. Jada panted, a thank you forming in her soft eyes. We were only friends, survivors that depended on each other after being alone for far too long. But I loved her. I loved her as I would love the woman of my dreams. "Hold on," I said, pushing myself up while pulling her arm. It was when the winds had begun to blow harder and the earth beneath my chest made a cracking sound. Did I begin to panic? Especially when my mind was briefly pulled away from the situation, my thoughts running wild with images and memories that couldn't have been mine. Even with my lost memory, I knew that these didn't belong to me. "Hurry!" Jada urged, snapping me back to reality. I clenched my teeth and pulled as hard as I could. But the moment I pulled her up and was on my feet, the earth broke from beneath us and we fell. Quickly reaching up, I grabbed at the edge of the cliff, Jada's wrist tight in my grip, and we hung there, praying that I was holding something solid. I looked down at Jada, her eyes wide with fear, yet trusting. Haven't I trusted someone this way before? It felt all too familiar, but I wasn't sure. "Don't worry," I said. "I'll pull us." I was cut short by my own grunting, my temples pulsating so painfully that it felt as if my head would explode. Squeezing my eyes shut, I had begun receiving more images of a world that was not mine, but it was a world that was real. Years of life flashed before my eyes. The life of a boy, a son, a brother, and a king. The life of Vexton, the god of rage, now known as the god of love. He sacrificed his love for the future of our people. The earth beneath my hand began to crumble. Jada grunted, fear filling her red-rimmed eyes. "We're going to fall. I can't hold us up," I thought, my mind still filling with memories. It'll break under both of our weight, and I can't die. "Ellison." My name sounded more like a question from her lips, and I could hear the confusion. "What are you?" I kept my eyes closed. I must live. I'm the only one. All I heard was the sound of Jada's gasp as I let her wrist slip through my fingers. Unbelieving what I had just done, I looked down, catching her eyes one last time, catching the pain and confusion of my betrayal. I have to live, I thought, tears filling my eyes. I have to. For years, I wondered if that was really what I was thinking the day I let her go, or was it from my own fear of falling? I could never give any other reason besides my being a coward. I tried to tell myself that it was because I had to live and help create the new world. Vexton had given me his memories for the very purpose, so my life added more value. I told myself that there was no time, and I had to make a quick decision. I told myself lies. The truth was that I was just afraid to fall. Even more so then because I finally knew what was down there. So, I had to let go. And I used being more important than her as my excuse to do so. As I sat in my small hut and peered at my villagers through the window, I wondered if I would make up for my cowardice. I suffered much from my guilt over the years, and when I finally found the peace I had been seeking, I wished to share it with the world, to finally rebuild. The village was only a start, and because we are united in our cause, we would grow. Never would we suffer from that chaos again. The chaos before and after the great destruction would not follow us into our future. Standing from my chair, I pulled my long white hair into a ponytail and wrapped my white cloak over my shoulders, a large black letter L embroidered in the center of the back. I wore my cloak proudly, embodying the great man I was meant to be, as I lead our new world into a utopia, into Lytonia. Years ago, when I was jumping from place to place and speaking with different people all over the world, I managed to establish a small number of survivors who believed in what Lytonia stood for. Those first few survivors each trained hard under my watch until they gained the ability to jump into their lighter forms. Those survivors had then helped me spread the word of our new utopia and were eventually known as the founding families. I walked out of my hut and into the fresh air. It was still early, so most of the villagers were asleep, while others were up and beginning their daily chores. When creating Lytonia, we decided not to follow any of the old ways of our world before, but instead started a completely new society. We set new laws and expectations, all of which the founding families voted for. It was decided that we needed to implement martial law early on. That way, we would create a nation of soldiers, forever bonded in peace. With discipline and power, we would never fall into chaos again. When the early storms were caused by the three god brothers, we lost control of ourselves. Maybe for a time we could maintain order, but we allowed ourselves to go rampant. We didn't contain, protect, or save anyone. It was every man for themselves, all until I met Jada. My heart ached at the thought of her. It was a pain that I knew would never go away. I loved her more than I thought, and I would have to forever live with the reality that I let her die from my own cowardice. "Mr. Ellison," a young girl called from across the dirt path. "Hello." I turned, avoiding my thoughts of Jada, and remembered to show kindness to the child, as I would everyone else here. She was a Kali, the white band on her wrist a clear indicator of her class. Sometimes I looked at the young Kalis and pitied them for being descendants of the damned. But then I would remind myself that our Kalis could be molded into loyal Lytonian citizens. They could change. They were the hardest to control after winning the Battle of Light against the rising rebellion of Somas and Kalis. But with the blessing of Vexton, we regained control, better equipped to deal with them now. That war had proven to us that the Somas and Kalis could not be trusted with their own leadership, our first conclusion when establishing the laws of the three classes. We Vexes were meant to rule and enforce in order to maintain peace. That was what Vexton wanted of us. Most of today's villagers agreed with the Lytonian way. They agreed that the descendants of the dark gods were to be conditioned in a way that they would never follow the chaotic ways of their ancestors. In our earlier years of development, it was the Kalis and Somas who band together to oppose the world we wished to create. With more trained Vexes outnumbering their rebels, we maintained order and made the decision to have the Kalis and Somas conditioned into absolute loyalty to our cause. Once they finally understood, they decided to stand with us. It took years to attain their obedience, but they were eventually on our side. Their leaders willfully sacrificed their lives for all to see, displaying a public execution in hopes that they will move their loyalties to us. They had. This was how we kept order in our new world. It was how we made sure that we maintained peace. After maintaining peace for so long, we understood the necessity of assimilation and conditioning. We needed to make the people forget the old world, and over time, we had accomplished that very goal. Maybe not completely, but there was no mention of what used to be by the citizens, just of what was to come. When the little collie appeared to be shying away from me, I remembered to give a warm smile and a wave. The girl's smile grew, her eyes lighting up. Then she ran barefoot up the path to report for her daily servant duties, her stained white dress blowing in the wind behind her. Looking up at the sky, I saw that it was about time that the Kali and Soma children were headed to their workstations, while our Vexes, Somas, and Kalis of age were training as soldiers. It was the children that essentially kept our town clean and in order. The older Somas and Kalis' duties were to serve the families of training soldiers and high-class citizens while they focused tirelessly on bringing greatness to our nation, no matter what their gifts may be. Smiling in satisfaction, I walked down the path with my hands behind my back, nodding and waving at the young soldiers in training, running off to the training grounds outside the gates. As the sun began to rise higher in the sky, more villagers were filling the pathway, heading to their destinations. I stopped at the entrance of the tall wooden gates that shielded us from the outside world and watched as the young ones jogged through and onto the open field, surrounded by tall, rustling trees. The training grounds were just ahead, some trainees already sparring for fun as they waited for their instructor to arrive. There was laughter among the youth, bringing a small smile to my lips. The sound of laughter from my people gave me hope that we would succeed in creating the perfect world. I chuckled to myself. It feels perfect already. Stepping back, I looked up at the tall gates as they began to close and wondered how we would go about building the wall discussed in our last meeting. The Kalis would be Lytonia's best option for building it, due to their natural strength. The Vexes must remain training for the collector program, so the Somas will have to take over servant duties until the walls are completed. Afterwards, we'd reintegrate them back into their citizenship, only I'd like to reward them with more freedom. This would be their final test of loyalty. I placed my hand on my chin in thought. This would also solve the issue of maintaining control over the other classes down the line. There was concern that there would be future uprisings, that there would always be a Soma or Kali who believed themselves more than what they were. But with generations of servitude, there would eventually be a time where every Soma and Kali citizen would know and accept their place. They wouldn't even question it. They would one day accept that they are the lesser beings, meant to be controlled at our will. They will need us to, for we are the saviors of this world. As for their reward, I could create a system that both kept them in line while allowing them equal opportunity. After the years that will be spent building this wall, they would deserve a gift, a thank you for serving their nation. Maybe one day they'll prove to be as good and as true as we Vexes are. Somas and Kalis were known for their betrayal and disloyalty, as Symmetrius and Calison's descendants. I turned around and faced the village, one day to expand and grow. It wasn't the walls that we should have been focused on at the moment, but the village itself. We still slept in huts, and our ground was a dirt path instead of pavement. It was time that we finally rebuild. I will discuss the use of the dark descendants with the council, I thought as I turned to walk down the path that led to the council hut. I always found myself in awe at my creation, the world I created in tribute to Jada. I knew my duties as the wielder of memories was to bring us all together as one. But after Jada's death, after what I had done to her, I understood the kind of world we were meant to live in. And it wasn't a world meant for the weak. It wasn't a world that was meant for the man I was in the past. Jada was always the strong one. When she met me, I was helpless and alone. I had no memories, so we figured I hit my head during the first rumble. I couldn't remember who I was, but I knew that I was afraid of everything. At times, I couldn't understand why, in moments of danger, I was nothing more than a coward. Why was it always Jada that had to protect me? People sometimes tried to harm us when we weren't running from the end of the world. It wasn't always safe around other starving humans, and when we came across them, I found that I was rarely ever any help. Sometimes, the moment I felt in danger of another person, the only thing I could ever do was stand there and look at them. The guilt I felt from allowing Jada to fall consumed me. After everything she had done for me, I chose myself and let her go. The worst thing was that I lied to myself about why I allowed her death. I placed myself above her, and then I lost her. That was the truth. I would probably never love another woman again. There was no time for love, and I did not deserve it if there were. I wasn't a trustworthy man when it came to my heart. How could I be without all my memories? My reactions towards a woman's love felt unpredictable, even to myself. Sometimes, I was grateful that I couldn't remember all the details of my past. The images in my dreams were dark and painfully vivid. There were dark rooms, a basement of sorts, and the faint smell of blood. And then there was the hum of a man, his voice deep and frighteningly joyful. I remembered pure terror in my dreams as he dragged me by my wrist into the darkness, but I couldn't remember anything surrounding that. I couldn't remember the man or the place he held me in, but I could remember the pain. I remembered being in constant trepidation for whatever was to come. I was a weak boy that had grown into a weak man, and my weakness was what killed Jada. That weakness will not be tolerated in our utopia. My utopia. When the weekly council meeting finally ended, we exited the tent and dispersed into the sunset, waving our goodbyes. As usual, Emery Charlotte walked the paths with me, observing the village as we discussed the future of our nation. As a young woman, she was one of the first to follow me in my path to greatness. While searching for followers, I found her and her people starving on the broken mountain with no safe way down and no understanding of their powers due to their constant need for survival. After teaching them what I could, they had no choice but to escape due to the last few rumblings. The mountain was going to crumble. Only a handful of the Charlotte tribe survived when it finally had, and the ones who lived followed and helped bring my vision to reality. The Charlotte tribe, now known as the Charlotte family, would always serve as strong allies. I am the reason that they continue to exist this day. Emery, her green eyes glistening in the dimming sunlight, smiled as the youth soldiers ran back to their homes. Doors opened, and the hut lights shined onto the path, welcoming families awaiting their young. Even the Soma and Ka-Li children appeared happy to return to their homes after a long day. They would learn to appreciate these days, and when the new order is announced, they will strive to find their way back to them. One day, they will prove to deserve this freedom again. I looked down at Emery, her expression calm as she looked ahead. Her dark hair fell in waves over her shoulders, the darkness of her skin and hair a complete contrast to the white cloak she was wearing. It made everything beautiful about her stand out. The sudden sound of yelling ahead stopped us in our tracks. Some of the other villagers stopped to see what was going on. Explosions of yellow flames now erupting from left and right, heading in our direction. Emery and I were instantly on our guards, those wild yellow flames clearly coming from a god's child, the darkest of creatures to take form of Calison's and Samatrius's darkness. A defect. Screams erupted as villagers who had caught a flame were running for their lives. Only a few seconds passed before diamonds began to rise. A deep frown formed on Emery's face, her expression deadly. Just as she remembered the day of red diamonds. It was because of that day we knew well to never give a defect a chance to ever repeat history. That day is the reason this part of the village is so far behind. After the destruction, we were back to stage 1. Defects were too dangerous, powerful, and out of control. We were to kill any within or outside our walls on sight. "I can handle this," Emery said, just before pulling out her dagger and sprinting in the defect's direction. With the path now cleared, I could see that the defect was a young man, maybe not even 18 years old yet. His eyes were wild as he sprinted in our direction, his yellow irises glowing bright as flames burst from his palms. He displayed the look of panic and fear, but I could see through the lie. He enjoyed murdering my people. His kind only existed for the purpose of destroying us, and thus they must be annihilated. Emery was like a flash in the air. One moment she was beside me, and the next she was fighting the defect. His skills were decent, but no match for hers. Emery Charlotte was one of the strongest fighters in her family, trained by me in the art of lighter jumping. Using my teachings, she created her own use of it, becoming a force to be reckoned with. When the young defect froze in place, his hands shaking as he held them out in front of him, he spoke. "Please, just let me leave," he cried. "I don't want to hurt anyone else. I just want to go." Emery tensed, her only weakness being her heart. Emery was the youngest of the council, her resolve somewhat shaky in moments such as this. I believed in her loyalty to the nation, but it was apparent that she would always be the weak-hearted one when it came to compassion. She was always the compassionate one. I suppose that part of her was why I cared for her. She didn't fear being compassionate in the world of strength that I was creating. She didn't fear me. Emery lowered herself as she did before charging at another person. When the defect turned the direction of his palm towards a Vex villager, she flashed towards the defect. Simultaneously, her lighter form took shape and tackled the villager onto the ground, dodging the flames. The moment was so fast that I doubted anyone even noticed the glowing lighter form of Emery flashing through the air. It disappeared the moment that she collided onto the ground, an ability she hadn't yet mastered. Emery, now one person again, stood with the dagger in the defect's belly. I could see the discomfort in the way she stood, her back rigid as she held the dagger in his stomach. She was heaving, but otherwise fine. The defect whimpered, blood drizzling from his mouth and onto his ripped shirt. I just wanted to leave. I didn't want to hide anymore. Tears fell down his cheeks as he stared into Emery's eyes. She stared back, her expression frozen. This isn't a perfect world. Agitated by his words and Emery's weakening response, I strode over to them, summoned a knife to my hand, and sliced it across his throat. When blood spurted onto Emery's face, she let go of the dagger with a shaky hand, the defect's body falling into diamonds and dust. She appeared shaken at first, her eyes blinking through the blood dripping down her face. But when her gaze met mine, she slowly began to regain control of herself. Although her compassion was what made her who she is, in order for her to be the best version of herself, she was going to have to change. I was going to help her with that. That thing was no human, Emery, I reminded her. There is no need to feel for it. Emery gave a slow nod before wiping the blood from her face. She then picked up her dagger and placed it back in her waistband, her eyes directed on the yellow stone left in the defect's place. "You should wear it as a necklace," I said, slowly picking it up. "It would stand as a symbol to your strength." Admiring the jewel, I smirked. "I'll have it made into one for you." Emery's only response was to stare at the stone, her expression uneasy, but she wouldn't deny me. Looking around, I noticed how our soldiers in training were working together to put out the yellow flames. Our Elims were at work summoning energy, while our Brights rushed for buckets of water. Our Dims provided medical attention to help the villagers heal. "This is the perfect world," I stated, undoing the defect's last words. "Look at us. Look at how we respond to such a situation. Everyone is working together, just as Vexton wanted. Chaos will never rule us again." When I turned to Emery, I saw that she was no longer looking at me, but at the people. Her expression was mostly unreadable, her youth and wisdom intertwined into thoughts. No one else would notice the torment in the way she stood, silently replaying the moment in her mind. I knew that she was in shock, but I had to keep pushing her. I had to harden her. "I agree," she said in a low voice. "As you should," I nodded. "Now, we must find the traitorous family who raised him and burn the woman who birthed him, just as he burned our villagers. Can you find them for me, Emery?" I could see that Emery was struggling with her thoughts, but she would never turn me down. Her loyalty to me was absolute. "Of course." Her voice was low, her body still rigid with shock. "Good. We must show the people what happens when they hide defects within our walls." Emery nodded and had begun walking in the direction that the defect had come, everything about her displaying control. I was the one who knew her deep down. She was suffering. "And Emery?" She stopped, only raising her chin to hear my next order. "You will be the one to execute them." Emery's body tensed before her shoulders slowly lowered. Then she continued on, disappearing into the night.
Thank you for listening to The Beginning, Episode 2 of Diamonds and Dust. If you liked this episode and would like to listen to more, please click the subscribe button. Remember that if you would like the full story, check out the links to the Descendants series below. You can listen to the series as audio, or you can read the ebook or paperback. Also, feel free to join my readers team on Facebook and become an official Lyter. There we discuss the series, play games, and have giveaways. You'll also get first look at what I'm working on next. Otherwise, stay tuned for more episodes.